Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, a leading Democratic senator draws a line in the sand over staffing cuts at the VA. Senator Reuben Gallego of Arizona pledges he will block all senior Veterans Affairs nominees over the agency's personnel cuts. We talk to him about what's driving his stance and other items related to veterans issues. Plus, a look at the Sky Soldiers of NATO. Check out what the paratroopers of the allied countries do to get ready for combat. It's the latest in news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon, here on Defense News Weekly.
Senator Gallego, thank you for sitting down with us. You're on the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. You're a veteran with a pretty prominent voice. And I know this week you came out and said that you have a lot of concerns with what's going to go on with VA, some of these proposed cuts. You actually have put a hold on all nominees at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Why the reason for that? What do you think that's going to do here?
Well, look, simple reason, being in the veteran community, talking to friends that I serve with, going back to Arizona, people are afraid, and when I say people, veterans and their families, that these cuts are just arbitrary. They have no clear intention. It's potentially going to harm services to people. And if you want to improve the VA, I think there's ways to do it, but just taking an arbitrary cut out of nowhere and saying that you have to fire 88,000 people without any real plan, how's that going to affect services? How's it going to affect our veterans? And I don't believe it's possible. In Arizona, they just told my VA hospital, the Phoenix VA hospital, they have to get rid of 15% of their workforce by June. This is the Phoenix VA that's had problems in the past because of lack of staffing. And now all of a sudden, they're gonna just start getting rid of 15% of their workforce. And talking to people that use the VA, I actually have used the VA in the past too, talking to current workers, so there is no way they're gonna be able to cut 15% of that staff without it actually affecting veterans. And I'm just not gonna let that happen. I'm gonna try to slow the process as much as possible, so at least we could save a lot of these workers, and more importantly, potentially save veterans' lives.
So VA has said that they want to do a review before they go into some of these cuts, and they're going to look and see where there's efficiency and everything. But they've also announced that number, that 80,000.
Right. Where did that number come from? Right.
Yeah. So.
And in Arizona, they just sent out a notice starting in April that they want the Phoenix VA to identify the 15% of the staff that they want to get rid of by June. Where did that review come from? Right. This is real people's lives. Veterans will die. They're going to be lack of services, lack of mental health services. There's so much work we've been doing to turn around the VA. And some 22-year-old Silicon Valley boy is coming up with an idea of what there should be cuts to the VA, has zero concept about the VA.
Now, VA has grown dramatically in terms of its workforce and its budget in recent years. So just so I can clarify, you're not saying that there's not room for any efficiencies here.
Right, I'm sure there's efficiencies, but let's actually think about this versus just having an arbitrary cut. And by the way, the VA has grown because the veteran population has grown. Because we rectified a bad situation where there were so many veterans that were exposed to toxic burn pits, I'm including one of them, that we saw a lot of veterans that were being affected by it, some of them dying, that we had to expand the VA in order to meet that demand when we exposed these men and women to these toxins. And now because there's this idea that everywhere in government there needs to be efficiency, that includes firing arbitrarily people, veterans are going to be at the end of it. If you want to do this, then let's do this in a bipartisan manner. Let's sit down and actually have a real review about where we can find efficiencies, where we can make investments. And maybe that does mean that we have to close some areas, shift some areas, merge some people, hire more people, invest in technology. But the fact is they're not doing any of that. They're just saying the best way for us to do it is just to cut 15% of the workforce, at least in Arizona, 88,000 people across the country. But they're not telling us how that actually is going to improve the lives of veterans or actually bring efficiency.
So you just mentioned it here, but this is not just a theoretical exercise for you. You're a veteran. You served in a war zone. You had some experience with the burn pits overseas, and you've got quite a few friends, contacts, folks who are using VA.
Yeah.
So in recent years, we've seen VA try and push out and bring more folks in. How do you think that work has gone? And is there a fear that this all starts to slide back, even if the cuts don't go through?
Look, I fear that there is going to be a slide back in terms of people that are not going to go and try to get their services. Veterans aren't going to go try to get services. And I certainly saw that when I returned from the war in 2005. I was deep into PTSD. I didn't really recognize it then. A lot of my guys did. I tried to go get services, I think around 2006, 2007, was rejected, and because of paperwork. And, and I should have just stuck it out, but I didn't. And I went without for almost 9 years. And I'm afraid that, the work that we've been doing, Democrats and Republicans, through multiple administrations, to get the VA where it is, where people feel like they could go and get the work and the services that they need, are just going to feel rejected, and they're just going to walk away. And we know that veterans, especially those with PTSD, if they don't seek treatment, they will have a higher likelihood of either A, not really having a fulfilling life, or B, suicide.
Yeah. On that mental health issue, I know that's been a challenge for VA to recruit and retain those folks.
Absolutely.
In the past. It seems self-evident, but if you're trying to bring more of those folks in and having these cuts at the same time, is that sending a mixed message to the medical community?
Well, absolutely. I mean,
commitment?
especially some of our trained therapists, they can go and work in the private sector and make a lot more money than they are in the VA. And so why, if you are coming out of college with some debt, would you go and work for the VA if at any point the VA could arbitrarily just fire you? And they're not just firing you and giving you severance. They're literally firing you, giving you your last paycheck, and you're off health insurance within a month, right? And so how are we going to recruit the doctors, the nurses, the specialists, all these people that can make better pay, more, and be more stable in the private sector when you have this gross abuse of employees? And again, it's not the employees that matter in the end. It's the services they provide to these veterans that are going to be hurt at the end.
Right. All right. So you're a Democrat. You're in the minority in the Senate right now.
I've noticed.
This hold is something you can do. But talk to me about how effective this can be and what else you can do in terms of fighting against some of these proposals.
Well, this is one of the few kind of arrows I have in my quiver. Normally, these types of nominees would just kind of sail through without any type of fight, and I'm going to make the VA administrator fight for his political appointee. And until I feel that the veterans are going to be held harmless, he's going to have to push these through the hard way. And then when it comes to the budget, every time I have an opportunity to make sure that we shore up the Veterans Administration budget and services for our veterans, I'm going to do that. It's one of the main reasons why I voted against the last budget resolution, because it cut $1.2 billion from veteran services, and I'm just not going to vote for that. We've been talking for so long about taking care of men and women, and when you join, you talk about service to your country and how your country is going to remember you, and I guess we've forgotten that. Well, I haven't forgotten it, and I'm going to try to hold this country's oath to these veterans.
When we come back, how can Republicans and Democrats find common ground to best serve veterans? Gallego offers his thoughts.
So you're new to the Senate this session, but you're not new to Congress. You've been over in the House, so you're used to having some of these conversations. I wonder, just in the years that you've had here in Congress.
I would say I'm not used to having these conversations. Most of the time, the question has been, how much more can we do? Democrats and Republicans have always been aligned, and the VA and funding our veterans has always been a bipartisan issue. Sometimes we wanted to spend a $10 billion, and sometimes Republicans want to spend $9 billion. But there never has been a point where let's just go and arbitrarily cut the VA. Let's just start cutting services and without any regard to the actual livelihood and lives of our veterans. This is new.
So it's been such a rapid shift under the Trump administration.
Yes.
Here. Do you think that that's something you can rein back in by telling your story, by telling the veterans' perspective? Is that something that you think, again, this is all happening in quick succession here over the next few months as the budget process plays out? Do you think you'll be able to talk to your colleagues and say, this is why the money is important, this is why the employees
That's my goal.
important?
Look, I know my Republican colleagues here care about veterans. They're just as patriotic as I am. A lot of them have served. A lot of them have used VA services like I have. For some reason right now, they don't necessarily want to get into that fight. And so I'm hoping that I can encourage them to get into this fight with me, because if they do, they'll realize that there is hundreds of thousands of veterans that actually are with us. They believe in us. They understand what we're doing. And there's just, again, and there also is just no logical way that you can cut 88,000, VA employees. Meanwhile, by the way, we still have to be growing. So the cut is not the 88,000. It's also the fact that we're not even growing more than we're supposed to, and the future generations that are going to be affected by this, is going to be harmful. And I think, hopefully with time, I could get my Republican colleagues to join me in this fight.
So what is the disconnect? Is it just the approach from the Department of Government Efficiency and this idea of savings first and everything else second, or are you attributing it to just a loss of keeping the eye on the ball from the administration?
I think it's a combination of both. I think the Doge boys are a lot of Silicon Valley elites that have never served in the military, have no family that's ever served in the military, have very zero connections to the VA, and I think they look at the VA. It's one of the third biggest budgets in the country, and they think that if they can cut anywhere, that there's a way to cut. And first they'll go for employees and what they think is not necessary services, and eventually they'll go after benefits, and all because they want to have tax cuts. I think the Trump administration says they value veterans. I've seen them in the past follow that up. When I worked with Donald Trump in his first administration, we did some good work in the VA with the administration, but I think this time they have taken their eye off the ball, and I'm hoping that I can bring their attention back.
Do you think that's where the public stands as well? Or do you think the public is going to reject these things? Because there is that disconnect. There's a lot of folks who do just look and say, oh my goodness, $350 billion for a government agency, that's a lot of money. I don't understand what it goes towards. It must be inefficient.
Yeah.
How much of that idea, that message do you think you need to take, not just out to the White House, but out to the public?
Well, look, I just had a veterans town hall about 2 weeks ago in Sierra Vista. Sierra Vista is a military town, Fort Huachuca there, very Republican town. And from what I heard from veterans is that, look, you could always improve the VA. And we're all for improving the VA, and we're all for finding efficiencies. But this is not the way to do it. This is just an arbitrary cut. You're taking a meat cleaver to something that could be done with a precision tool. It's also, of all the government agencies, for them to do this to the VA, you could go slower. There's no rush here. Work with us, work with veteran organizations, work with Democrats and Republicans, and have a thorough review and see where we can do better. And I think there are areas we can do better. There's, I think, areas we could be investing more in, but this is not the way to do it. The go fast and break things approach that the Silicon Valley world has does not work when it comes to veterans. Because when you break things, people die. Veterans commit suicide, veterans become homeless, and you can't undo that. And so that model may work in other departments and other government bureaucracies, but we owe it to these veterans to take our time, figure out what to do and how to do it safely, because once we break it, we're not getting it back.
I know you've been focused on veterans policy, but I know you've also been watching what's going on at the Defense Department as well, with some of the recent signal scandal, the sharing of classified information, or not classified, but sensitive information over a non-government network there. As someone who served on the front line, someone who saw quite a bit of combat, what's your reaction to that, and what are you hearing again from the veterans, from military members about the concerns with this issue?
Well, it's not a concern, but I think for a lot of them, they're more insulted than anything else. Like, we know operational security. And just because the President and the Secretary of Defense refused to classify what they spoke at as having a top secret classification, doesn't mean what they did wasn't dangerous. And the fact that they're openly lying to us and saying there was nothing wrong with what they did, when we've been there. If you tell someone when you're leaving a certain fob or an area and what you're bombing and what the weapons and platforms you're going to use, it's pretty simple to find out how quickly they're going to be overhead. So number one, it's insulting to the community, in my opinion. Number two, it does worry us about the reputation and the ability of the Secretary of Defense. I think it's there's some things that are very good that the Secretary of Defense is doing, some of bringing back the warrior ethos. I think, as a Marine veteran, I appreciate that. But some of the stuff that he was talking about on that Signal chat seemed to be more to impress his friends than to actually, effectively execute an operation. And, the most important thing you have to focus, especially I think as a leader, especially in the military, is mission accomplishment. And he potentially compromised that mission. And what does this mean for other missions going forward?
Last question for you here. As you try and find paths forward here and try and find some bipartisan, you said there was a couple issues that you think there's going to be bipartisan agreement on. Have you had any success reaching out to Secretary Collins, Secretary Hegseth, any of the administration officials there, or is it just a one-way line of communication right now from administration, the executive side? Well,
so it's a mixed bag actually. I voted for Secretary Collins. I served with him in the House of Representatives. I wanted to give him a good chance and opportunity because I think I owe it to the voters of Arizona. So I'm very disappointed that he's going down this road. I've actually had some really good work with Secretary of the Interior, a couple of the other secretaries and nominees. We've had a good working relationship. We've actually been able to fix some problems that have come up because of cuts, just misunderstanding, things of that nature. So I'm keeping the options open just because I am disagreeing with the administrator right now does not mean that I won't work with other secretaries on other issues. I'm always open to bringing results back for the country, but at the core, we have to protect our veterans, and that's what I promised to do. That's one of the main reasons why I even ran for office, ever at all. And I can't at this point just sit silently and just let this keep going as if it's normal.
Senator, thanks so much for the time.
Thanks,
I know there's a whole bunch of other hearings and events to get to, so we'll let you get to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, brother.
When we come back, our financial expert is back with her latest tips. Don't go away. On this edition of Money Minute, Jeanette Mack from Navy Federal Credit Union is back with her latest advice for financial wellness.
Most of us still use cash some of the time, but a recent Pew Research study showed that in less than a decade, the share of Americans who go cashless in a typical week has increased by double digits. And thanks to the pandemic and the global adoption of contactless payment technology, the use of credit cards, especially for traveling, has boomed. Good news, though, travel credit cards have amazing perks that can save you money, time, and a lot of hassle in some cases. So do the research to find cards that earn you points toward airfare, hotels, or even cold hard cash. Think about other extras too, like 0 foreign transaction fees, priority boarding, and free hotel stays, or other travel-related benefits. Don't forget to compare annual fees either. Make sure the fee can be recouped by how much you travel and how often you use the perks on your card. Maybe the annual fee pays for itself at some point. And since the real point is saving money, shop rates online to get the best one for your budget. For your next trip, you'll still need a little cash, but don't leave home without your new travel credit card.
To get more coverage of military and defense topics, slip into that ghillie suit and hide out for a while with militarytimes.com and defensenews.com. And to be the most up-to-date intelligence officer in the business, sign up for our Early Bird Brief, compiled each morning bringing you the most recent headlines. And if social media is where you collect open source intelligence, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X. And for you Gen Z troops, we're on TikTok, so go find us there as well. When we come back, a look at NATO's Sky Soldiers, the paratroopers preparing for the defense of the Northern Alliance. Stay tuned.
Ever since man mastered the science of flight, people have jumped out of planes. In World War II, the concept of dropping soldiers from the air developed as an effective military tactic to create chaos within enemy ranks. By recruiting physically fit people with mental toughness and daredevil attitudes, armies were able to develop paratroopers to undertake daring missions behind enemy lines. Over the years, paratroopers from NATO allies have done a variety of tasks and operations in conflicts around the world. Today, they are a dynamic, versatile, high-readiness force and an integral part of NATO's operational strength, deployed to places where other troops simply cannot get to, able to operate independently and with little support, part of an international community forged on determination and courage. They are the paratroopers of NATO.
You got to be a little bit crazy just to take that step into the wind, put those knees to the breeze, and, fall for 1,250 feet.
Becoming a paratrooper was one of the steps into becoming something bigger than myself.
All right, when 129 gets back, make sure he's getting rigged up. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000.
The journey for any paratrooper, no matter where they're from, starts in training. In the US, that means completing a basic airborne course at the US Army Airborne School at Fort Moore in Georgia.
We have students who've never even flown in an airplane until they get here. There's a huge confidence step that they have to gain. Hopefully what we get out of it is brand new paratroopers at the end of it who are confident and ready to go to their unit and increase the force of which we have for airborne qualified people.
Oh, looks good. Hit the ground just like that. Squeeze those toes.
Every year, approximately 15,000 new recruits enroll on the 3-week course.
I was honestly very excited when I got here. Of course, I had those doubts that I wasn't going to make it, but you get a brief once you get here and they tell you what to expect, starting from ground week to tower week to jump week. And they overall just prepare you from the moment you get in the door, physically and mentally, to get out of the plane.
Airborne.
Part of that mental preparation is overcoming the fear reflex when jumping from great heights.
1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000.
To break the students in, week 2 of the course focuses on an exercise known as the 34-foot tower.
So the 34-foot tower is the very first time where a lot of students will move up heights, and then they get up to the top. It's shaped kind of like the inside of the door for the airplane, and a scientist said 34 feet is the same as 1,250 feet mentally. Our brain doesn't differentiate it. Either way, we're jumping out. And if they can gain the confidence of jumping out the 34-foot tower, then they will have the confidence to jump out of an airplane.
But learning to jump from the tower isn't just about overcoming a fear of heights.
They're getting some more training on actual proper exits. They're getting training on reacting to certain malfunctions and activating their reserve. And then they're also getting the training on exiting the aircraft as a group as opposed to as individuals. You're like, oh!
Those that make it through the course will become qualified paratroopers, which is known in the community as earning their wings.
I decided to be a paratrooper because my dad was a paratrooper. My dad is my biggest role model. He has always been my #1 supporter. And it's something that my dad takes a lot of pride in, and I wanted to join the same community and have the same amount of pride as my dad does.
In an unpredictable world, it is vital that NATO has specialist soldiers trained and ready to deploy.
We're physically, mentally, always ready to go. We know that we can respond to anything that we're told to real fast.
Well, that's all we have time for in this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.